Hello to my online learners. Let's start Unit 4. A lot of material again, and only a short period of time. So keep on it, keep with it. Now, the first thing is the excretory unit and the kidney. It can be confusing, but make sure you realize there are two separate systems. The whole idea of the kidney is to balance the blood and then put the leftover stuff in the urine. If you think of the kidney just to make urine, you're missing out the true function of the kidney. The kidney is to balance the blood and then put the extra stuff in the urine. So what we're going to look at in this one is the structure and location of the kidney, the flow of blood through the kidney, very important, something called glomerular filtration, and that's when the blood takes its information and puts it into, its waste, and puts it into the nephron of the kidney. Then we're going to look at how the kidney makes urine, the components of it, the process of it, and then how it controls it. So quite a lot going on, and a lot of terminology because we have different processes. Okay, when we look at the kidney, realize the kidney's main job is to filter blood. So as a result, it's got a very good blood supply. And anytime there is anything with a blood supply or related to the kidney, you have the word renal. So the renal artery takes the blood directly off the aorta. And that is important because you need to have the blood pressure of the aorta to help the filtration process. Also realize that this is a very active process. About every hour, you process about 5 liters of blood. Now you have overall 5 liters of blood. So that's like a big milk jug and a little milk jug. And you process it, pretty much all your blood gets processed once an hour, which is good, but to realize that if all that fluid came out and it wasn't balanced back in again, you'd have a problem. So you've got the kidney, which is this kidney-shaped organ, and there's 2 of them, one on each side. Here's the adrenal gland on top, and it's coming off the aorta, and then it goes back on the inferior vena cava. So very good blood supply. Then once you look at the blood, once you look at the blood supply and the filtration is done, you end up with urine collected, and urine will go down through the ureter, and you have 2 ureters. It collects and is stored in the bladder, and then it goes out the urethra to outside of the body. Okay, ureters, urethra. You have 2 ureters, and alphabetically ureters come before urethra. So that's another way I remember that ureters collect the urine, and then urethra is the opening out to the body. And the urethra is different in a male and a female. Females basically have their own exit, and males, it goes out through the penis. Good. So when we look at the kidneys, realize that they're only partially covered with the ribs. So they're partly protected, but not completely. So that's why if there's any sort of high contact sport, often you wear pads back here to protect it. So they're halfway below, and they're about the size of your fist, right at the back of your body. And it's something called retroperitoneal, which means there is the membrane layer of the peritoneum, which kind of puts the kidneys and sticks them to the back of the body. Okay, good. Now, when we look at the parts of the kidney overall, a lot of parts here. Let's look at the important ones. First off, you've got the word cortex. Cortex is an outside word, and then you have a medulla, which is an inside word. So you can actually see the renal cortex, which is this outside layer. And then you've got the renal medulla, which is the inside layer. And when they first looked at it, they saw that the medulla was in pyramid shape. So that's why they're called the renal pyramids. Okay. So you've got a hymen, which is where all the vessels come out. And then once the filtration is done, there is this collective vessel. So it starts as the minor calyx, then it becomes the major calyx, then it becomes the renal pelvis when it all joins, and then it becomes the ureter, which will then lead to the bladder. Good. When it talks about renal circulation, there is a flow of it, and it goes from big circulation to smaller capillaries. And the smaller capillaries are called glomeruli. Now, before we jump into how the kidney works, I want you to realize that the body has other ways of excretion, and the kidney is only one of them. So if you look on page 391 of the textbook, it talks about the process of eliminating waste is called excretion. And there's 4 organs of excretion. First off, there is the respiratory system. So every time you breathe out, out goes carbon dioxide, in comes oxygen. So carbon dioxide, and water. And you realize that the water comes out either lately when your glasses fog up because of your mask, and that water is coming out, realizing that your lungs are very moist. Then you have your integumentary system, which excrete water, electrolytes, lactic acid, urea, and sweat, and quite often other toxins. And I notice when I don't eat properly, if I eat a lot of junk, my face, I usually get like those underground zits on my nose, because that's the yuckiness of my body trying to get out so it goes out through my skin. Respiratory system, integumentary system, the digestive system, which we'll talk in the next unit, but the digestive system helps eliminate water. It also helps eliminate lipids, biopigments, and other metabolic waste. So realize that the food that you ingest doesn't actually become part of your body until it's broken down and absorbed in. So there is digestion as a process of breaking stuff down and getting rid of extra. Then you have the urinary system. So the urinary system is to filter the blood, get rid of metabolic wastes, drugs, hormones, salts, and extra water. Okay? Now, the metabolic wastes we are looking at, let's talk about them now. There's metabolic waste. There's, when proteins are broken down, they produce an amino group, which has nitrogen in it. If it was left unchecked, this nitrogen would form ammonia, which is very toxic. But instead, the body goes through processes to convert ammonia to urea and uric acid. So this way it's less toxic, but the body can get rid of it. Okay, let's go back to the kidneys. So we talked about the kidneys on the outer part. We talked about the parts of the kidney. Make sure you know this cross section. We also talked about the circulatory system of it. So just to place everything in order. So when you look at the renal circulation, you have the renal artery, and that branches directly off the aorta, which is important for blood pressure. As it enters, the renal artery divides and divides and divides into much smaller processes. And then after it's kind of filtered, the blood all collects and comes back to the renal vein. So now we are just going to take this chunk of it and look at the functional group of the kidney, which is called the nephron. And we're going to look at the nephron in great detail. So a nephron, let me just move this over a bit. There we go. The nephron kind of has 2 systems as we talk about it. There is the blood supply, which goes by it all, and then there is the nephron itself, which is the part of the kidney. So the nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. It is basically, most of it lies in the outer part of the cortex, but it loops into the medulla, and each nephron is well supplied with the blood, and there are millions of them. Is it millions or is it billions? Anyway, a large amount of them. What does it say? There are over 1 million nephrons. Okay. So first off, it's innervated because the nerves enter the kidney. Its sympathetic fibers stimulate afferent and efferent arterioles, and we'll look at that. So it controls the diameter, which in control can regulate the rate of urine formation. It is also affected by blood pressure. If blood pressure drops, the nerve will stimulate the release of renin, which we'll talk about later, which will restore the blood pressure. Okay, let's look at the parts. Let's go back to the PowerPoint so I can write on it. When we look at the nephron, you have, let's first off deal with the blood supply. As the blood supply comes in, here's the main artery, the renal artery, and then it breaks down and breaks down and breaks down again. And then it comes in, and it's balled up in this, it's called a glomerulus because someone thought it looked like a ball of wool. And three-dimensionally, it does look like a ball of wool. And then it comes out the efferent with an E, and then it goes all around the tubule. So let's look at and then it again joins up with the vein and leaves. So let's look at the blood supply. So you have the afferent arteriole, which is basically the little vein going to it. You have the glomerulus, which is the big capillary bed. You have the efferent arteriole. And then what you have, the rest is basically termed peritubule capillary. So peri means around. So these are the capillaries around the tubule, the nephron tubule. And then you have the renal vein at the end. So that is the blood supply. And the blood supply is there to supply the kidney with the material and then take up the stuff. Now, when you're looking at the kidney, don't think of the kidney as a filter because it's a horrible filter. It puts almost everything through. Think of the kidney cleaning the blood like you clean the fridge. When you clean the fridge, you normally take out everything from the fridge and then you put the good stuff back. And that's what happens with the functional unit, the nephron of the kidney. So let's erase this and then look at the nephron words. So there are blood supply words and then there's nephron words. And let's change color just because we can. So when we look at nephron, we have, so the nephron is the full structure. It's the tubule. Then the first part of the nephron will be around the glomerulus. So in some textbooks, it's called the glomerular apparatus. Sometimes it's called the Bowman's capsule. Then it goes to this part, which is close. So it's proximal and it's very twisted. So it is the proximal convoluted tubule, sometimes abbreviated PCT, the proximal convoluted tubule. Then it dips down into this loop, and this loop is called the loop of Henle. It's sometimes also called the loop of the nephron. The one going down is called descending, and the loop going up is ascending, okay? Then after that, you go to this other part that's convoluted, but this is the distant one, so this is the distal convoluted tubule. And then after that, all the distal convoluted tubules collect, and notice they're going to collect from other nephrons, so then you have the collecting duct. So the parts of the nephron are the glomerular apparatus, proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle or the loop of the nephron, and then the distal convoluted tubule. Good. So in the Bowman's capsule, or the renal corpuscle, or the glomerular capsule, is where the majority of the material comes off. Then, oh, here it's pulled out again. So renal corpuscle or Bowman's capsule, proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, collecting duct. Those are the parts.
The kidneys filter blood plasma, removing metabolic wastes, toxins, and excrete them in urine. During this process, they also maintain constant volume and composition of the blood, or homeostasis. Blood enters the kidney via the renal artery, which divides into smaller arteries Then arterioles. The arterioles get into contact with functional units of the kidney called the nephrons. This is where blood filtration and urine formation take place. The filtered blood then passes through a series of veins and exits the kidney via the renal vein. The urine is collected in collecting ducts and leaves the kidney via the ureters. Each kidney contains over 1 million nephrons. A nephron consists of two major parts, a glomerular capsule, or Bowman's capsule, and a long renal tubule. Renal tubules of several nephrons connect to a common collecting duct. There are 3 steps in the formation of urine: glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption and secretion, and water conservation.
Now that we've gone through the parts of the blood supply and the nephron, now let's look at urine formation. Realize you've got those two systems side by side. You have the blood wanting to give stuff to the nephron, and then the nephron gives it back. Like I said before, the kidney is like cleaning your fridge. You're going to give over everything and then put the good stuff back. So first one is glomerular filtration, and this happens in the glomerulus. Then we have tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion. So first step is glomerular filtration, and by the process of blood pressure, everything gets pushed out with the exception of protein, plasma, and red blood cells. Notice everything, good, the bad, everything. So you've got glucose and amino acids leaving, which is good stuff, along with the bad stuff such as your urea and your extra salts.
And water conservation. Blood enters the Bowman's capsule via the afferent arteriole, passes through a ball of capillaries called the glomerulus, then leaves via the efferent arteriole. The afferent arteriole is significantly larger than the efferent arteriole, creating a blood flow with a large inlet and small outlet. As a result, the blood hydrostatic pressure in these capillaries is much higher than usual. Hydrostatic and osmotic pressures drive water and solutes from blood plasma through a filtration membrane into the capsular space of the nephron. The filtration membrane acts like a sieve, allowing only small molecules to pass through. These include water, inorganic ions, glucose, amino acids, and various metabolic wastes such as urea and creatinine, and make up the glomerular filtrate. The amount of filtrate produced per minute is called glomerular filtration rate.
Okay, let's summarize this first step by looking at the textbook. The first step is called glomerular filtration because it occurs between the glomerulus and the glomerular capsule. Now, the afferent arteriole is larger than the efferent. So as a result, there is a pressure buildup, and also the pressure coming off of the heart, the blood pressure, will result in all things going through. Notice it goes, number 2 point says, such things such as electrolytes, glucose, amino acids, vitamins, nitrogenous waste. Everything goes through except the blood cells and the large protein plasma because they are too large. And as a result, the fluid that is filtered into the Bowman's capsule now flows into the renal tubule. And this rate of flow is called the glomerular filtration rate. It's about 180 liters a day, or 60 times your initial blood volume. So 90% of it gets reabsorbed, but most of it goes out. So realize that the kidney is a horrible filter because everything's going through, everything but the red blood cells and the protein. So this is why if you have blood in your urine, it shows that you're having problems with your glomerulus and in your glomerular capsule because blood should not be in the urine. Also, a little bit of protein can be in the urine, but you do not want a large amount of protein in the urine, and that again will show there's problems in your glomerular apparatus. Notice now that the fluid is in the nephron, it is called the filtrate. So that is step 1, glomerular filtration. The second step is called tubular reabsorption and secretion. So this is where 99% of the stuff gets reabsorbed. And it starts in the proximal distal tubule. So we've come through the glomerular apparatus, and now the sodium chloride gets reabsorbed and sodium is pumped. When sodium is pumped, water follows. Glucose and potassium carbonate will all go back from the filtrate to the blood. Okay, so 90, depends on the textbook, 90 something, or the majority of the stuff gets reabsorbed at this state. The next thing is in the loop of Henle, or the loop of the nephron. This is where the majority of the water gets reabsorbed. And as the water gets reabsorbed, it builds up a concentration gradient at this point. So on the ascending loop of Henle, sodium is pumped out. And when sodium is pumped out, that creates a concentration gradient. So then water will follow. Then at the end, this is the distal convoluted tubule. Now at the distal convoluted tubule, you can still have some more things returning to the blood. Notice with tubular reabsorption, you're going from the filtrate to the blood. Okay, to the blood. Then there's a process called secretion, and secretion, you're going, and the last step, to the blood, and you're rebalancing the blood, and you're putting things back into the filtrate. So here's an example of the hydrogen ion is going from the blood back into the filtrate. And this is a way of, if the blood is too acidic, you will get rid of hydrogen. Now realize at the back, when you're talking about secretion, you balance the blood and then put extra stuff into the filtrate. Okay, I want to stop here just because we've gone through a lot and I'm running out of time on this video because we're almost at 23 minutes. And then I will continue on with the video in, continue on with the excitement of urine formation in the next video.